point when I decide where I'm going to change everything was on the side of a highway. I was on a high-speed chase with her. We run into traffic. I'm chasing her down because she's not buying my bullshit, and I'm trying to convince her that, you know, or bend her to my will like I did everybody else.
She's in her car, and you're in another car chasing her?
Yeah, chasing her down. We hit traffic. She pulls over. I pull over, and I'm like, trying to convince her on the side of the road. There's a bunch of cars going by. All of a sudden,
oh my God.
Oh, dude, it was a mess, man.
Were you on meth?
Well, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So what ends up happening, man, is I fucking fall apart. I'm bawling on my knees, just fucking crying uncontrollably. And there's people honking, going by, and like the most surreal shit happened. I'm like, I feel like I'm floating above myself, looking at myself going, dude, you're just a pathetic fuck. You know, look at you. You're sitting here crying like a little bitch because your life is the way that it is. And what are you going to do? And from that point on, like I said, I knew I was going to a county jail that I'd never been to. I didn't want to be kicking drugs while I went there. And so I stopped doing it before I went in for about a month, 6 weeks before. Stopped doing the meth, stopped smoking cigarettes, went there, got out after the 90 days. My ex-wife now, well, I mean, she's still my wife then, but she takes me in, but she knows that she doesn't want to have nothing to do with me. She just does it out of pity. But I don't go back to it. So I start going to AA. I start playing adult slow pitch softball, get away from the group that I was hanging with, right? Managed to not fuck up my chance in the union. So I'm still have my apprenticeship that I can go back to, start working, not doing drugs, not doing any of that stuff. Playing softball was kind of a trip. I didn't like the league I was playing in, so I decided to start my own. And I did everything to start it, did all the stuff, got the insurances, the teams, all this stuff that I did together. It took a lot of planning. It took a lot of, you know, thinking about how to execute it. You know, I had a goal and I achieved it. And what happened was I realized that that was the way that you're supposed to build self-esteem and confidence, is by having a goal, achieving it, getting that good feeling from it, and then leveling up and going, well, if I can do that, then let me try this. And if I can do this, let me try that. And I just kept leveling up, got into the rowing team on my union, did that for like 5 years, became a sergeant at arms for my union. So I really got involved in other things that kept me away from, you know, the people and the places and all the other shit. Became a trustee for my union for 2 years. Then I was on the executive board for 2 years. In 2019, I ran for a business agent position and lost. The thing that I didn't realize, and that I do now, and that this is really what I advocate for, is I'm still a toxic person. None of the things that I'd done and all of the like inline things subconsciously that I learned, and all the habits and the bad habits and the bad behaviors and everything that I learned up to this point, those were all still there. They didn't go anywhere. They're just because I'm not on the drugs doesn't mean that those things went anywhere. Have you ever heard of the dry drunk?
No, what's the dry drunk?
So it's the guy that stops drinking but still an asshole. Still an abusive person, still, you know, the same guy that has the problem, but it's just not using the substances to, you know, subdue it.
Okay.
And so I start, what I start doing then is when I'm at work, I start listening to podcasts. And this is the part where I told you about, where I started listening to Joe Rogan, and I was listening to him for like 10 to 14 hours a day in my earbuds. And I'm following him. I'm following people like Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Lex Friedman, like all these people that have great ideas, and, you know, their philosophies and their perspectives are like pretty spot on, man. And I'm like buying into it. And little did I know that my mindset started changing. as I'm listening to this content all the time, I start taking on their ideas and their, sort of philosophies and, their thought processes. And I decide that I want to start a podcast. Because Joe Rogan's always going, hey, you should start a podcast to everybody that he talks to on his podcast, right? Well, I really thought he was talking to me because I thought that we were friends, right? I've been listening to this dude for so long that, like, oh, man, this is, he's like my buddy. And so I'm like, yeah, I should start a podcast too. And so I did. And what happened after that was pretty amazing. The podcast I started, I called it Nowhere to Go But Up, and I wanted to tell stories of other people that were like me, that had been through things like myself, bottoms and life struggles, and kind of how they got through it, right?
Yeah.
And as I'm listening to their stories and I'm relating to where they're at and I'm talking about it, I'm healing at the same time. So it's sort of like therapeutic for me. And I'm using the podcast to leverage guests to help me go through some of the things that I'm struggling with, like from, self-sabotage to anger to, all the things that are still kind of prevalent in my life. The one thing that I missed on this is that while I was playing softball, I end up in an opiate addiction. So I got hooked on painkillers for 7 years.
Jeez.
But because I got an injury playing softball, right?
Yeah.
And so and I told this story earlier today, but in my medical record, it says I'm an addict. And for them to get around giving me pain pills, they made me sign something that say that I won't come back and sue them for giving me these pills, right? So I take those.
So they can keep giving them to you.
Yeah. And so I'm taking these, dude, and I'm like, I turned into a full-blown addict again. I'm buying $500 a month in extra pills. I'm like, everything's revolving around these pills, but it's not to the point where it's affecting a whole lot in my life. I'm still able to level up and do the things that I'm doing versus meth, that every time I tried to do it.
So you're functioning, you're playing softball, you started a podcast, and you're, what kind of pills you taking? Vicodin?
Vicodin, and when I finally ended it was Percocets, 10s. And so I was doing like 120 a month.
Okay.
And then, I'd buy another extra 100. So sometimes it was 200. It wasn't like full blown. Like some people I've talked to would have done they were doing 20 or 30 pills a day. I was at about 10. And so, but I mean, it was just my whole, like everything revolved around these, like even from the point where I would, would sort of start running out, take too much, couldn't find any more, and would start to withdraw. And, all of that stuff that goes along with it, from trying to wean myself down, it was just a mess. And so that's going on. I'm still doing that. The podcast, I wanted to start that.
Oh, you haven't started your podcast at this point?
Well, I skipped a little bit forward.
Okay.
All right. So before I started the podcast I knew that if I was going to be, because, part of what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to be transparent about who I was and what I was struggling with, and I wanted to be as authentic as I could be. I couldn't do that if I was still taking pills, right?
Right.
And so I stopped. And how I stopped is I weaned myself off. So I was taking 10 a day. I went to 5 a day, to half of that,
Yep.
And until I got to about quarter pill. And then I started using edible marijuana to kind of lessen the effects of the withdrawal symptoms. And so that worked.
Did it?
Yeah, it did. And I still do it today. I use it as I microdose THC daily.
Really? Microdose THC. How much is a microdose?
5 milligrams.
Okay.
And so
You take it in the morning?
With my coffee.
Jesus Christ.
It's not enough to get you high, but it's enough to...
5 milligrams gets me high as fuck.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'm a lightweight, man.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've built up a tolerance, so 5 milligrams doesn't do a whole lot for me.
10 milligrams and I'm meeting the devil. I see demons.
On edibles?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Super lightweight.
Well, then you know that's no fun.
No, it's not.
So, I mean, that's what I had to learn too.
Yeah.
And like I make all my own edibles. And so like there'd be some times when I would make chocolate and this piece had a little more than it should. And I'd get to that point where I felt like I was going to die. Like, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm dying, right? That's not fun.
It's the worst.
But if you can get it to the point where you don't get to that, you're not high, but you're just before that. To me, it's almost like taking like what people would take Zoloft for, right? It helps me to focus a little bit because I am ADHD, and so it calms me down. It makes me focus a little bit. I still go off, you know. It's not 100%, but it's a lot better than it was. Where we at? We good?
Yeah.
Okay.